Kelly Sadler, and this is Politically Unstable. This week, I'm joined by Chad Wolf, who is the executive director of the America First Policy Institute, and he's the former acting DHS secretary in the Trump presidency. Welcome, Chad.
Hey, thanks for having me. Good to be here.
Well, we're going to talk all things immigration today. So this week, we saw the House impeached Secretary Mayorkas. Do you think that was a wise strategy, and do you think that he should have been impeached?
Yeah, look, I think there needs to be some accountability for what we have experienced over the last 3 years and what we will probably continue to experience for the next year or so. The circumstances of what's going on that border, which I'm sure we'll get into here a little bit, are unprecedented for the history of our country. We've never experienced anything like this. And the secretary has done a couple of things. One, he's not enforced the law. He's abused the law and his authority, and then he continues to lie about it to Congress and to others. And so, as I've said, policy differences alone are not enough to impeach a cabinet secretary, but these are not just policy differences. These are willful acts that are having serious effect and causing serious harm to not only Americans, but migrants alike. And so when it starts to get to a certain level, I think the House of Representatives, particularly the Republicans there, are saying, look, there's got to be some accountability for the almost 11 million people that have come into this country over the last 3 years. And I think that's what they've done here with that vote.
Well, I mean, the Biden administration for the longest time said that there was no crisis at the southern border. Right. Now, Joe Biden has admitted there's a crisis at the southern border, but he's saying that he needs Congress to act. And that will solve the problem, that he's got his hands tied. Kind of, what do you say to that, to that statement, to that defense of the job that he's doing?
Well, I think there's two things, and you hit on it at the beginning, which is between the president, which he said the border is not secure. I think that's almost an exact quote from about 7 to 8 days ago. And then you saw Secretary Mayorkas on Meet the Press this past weekend, where he said it's a crisis. These are two phrases and two words that they have not used in over 3 years. And so my question is, what's changed? What's changed in the last week and a half, where you're now saying it's a crisis, the border's not secure? And again, I think this is the strategy and the plan that they have, that somehow by saying these terms that they've pretty much ignored for the past 3 years, that somehow that puts more pressure on Congress to act. So I think that's important to call out. I think the American people see that. Now, when we talk about who's to blame, and so therefore who can fix the crisis, I think you have to look at the Biden administration. It's important to remember in 2021, in the first 100 days of the administration, they took 94 discrete and separate executive actions on immigration. And it's those actions and those actions alone that caused this crisis, and subsequent decisions, of course, over the last 3 years that have caused this crisis. It's not Congress. Congress didn't pass a law in 2021 that somehow caused this crisis. And so it's not really Congress's responsibility to fix the crisis. Now, can they help by passing some border security measures? Absolutely. But the Biden administration, the president and Secretary Mayorkas, have all the authority in the world to change this crisis, to bring it to an end, to address it, and they can do it tomorrow if they want to. It's much more impactful. It's much more lasting than anything that Congress, a Senate negotiated bill, or anything that the House can pass. They have the authority. They just won't use it.
So the Senate bill tanked last week, basically. Yeah. It's DOA in the House. But you wrote a column for us kind of saying the points of that wasn't a good bill in the first place. Can you kind of explain your column, explain why you think it should have tanked?
Yeah, well, there's a lot. I'm not sure we got enough time. There's a lot of issues that I had with the bill. A couple of high points that I would say it was overly complex. Complex in the sense of there's a lot of moving parts when you talk about border security and immigration enforcement, and how they all play with one another or interplaying not only within DHS, but with the Department of Justice, immigration attorneys, U.S. attorneys, and the like. And this bill created whole new provisions of the INA, untested provisions, untested policies, and untested programs. And my point is, why do that? Why not just go back to proven policies and procedures that work, whether that was in the Trump administration, Obama, or Bush? Take stuff that works, improve upon it, codify it into law, and move forward. But they didn't do that. They decided to create these provisions from whole cloth. And as we read them, they weren't going to do what they said they were going to do. The bill wasn't going to end catch and release. And you had members on the left of the Democratic Party that actually said that this actually doesn't close the border, that, this 5,000 trigger that was in the bill, if we ever reached that, then the requirement was you had to at least process 1,400 at ports of entry. Well, we've got 30 ports of entry along that southern border. Just do the math, and you can see that it was a shell game that was being played here. So, with a lot of other things I was not a fan of. I think the first thing that you've got to think of if you're going to pass new legislation, whether it's immigration or anything else, is do no harm.
Mhm.
If the bill does no harm, then that's a good starting point. Unfortunately, this bill would have done some harm to the current system and would not have ended the crisis.
So let's say, I mean, I don't see the administration at all taking different steps on
Yeah.
immigration. I think they have an open borders policy on purpose. So the only thing I think that will stem the tide of illegals crossing the border is a new president. We know Donald Trump's record. You worked for him, but what should be the first things that he should do on day one entering the office to kind of put an end to this crisis?
Yeah. So there's a lot of things, and I agree with you. I think at the end of the day, leadership is needed to end this crisis and turn the country in a different direction, bring some sanity, some process back to that border, bring some enforcement back to the border. And so I agree with you on that front. Look, whoever the America First president that comes in 25, in January 2025, there's a number of things that they can do. They can restart border wall construction that sends a signal in priority locations, reinstitute the Remain in Mexico program, put some pressure on Mexico to do more, not only with MPP or Remain in Mexico, I should say, but also against the cartels. You can restart some of the asylum cooperative agreements that we had, some of the asylum regs that we had. Sort of the list goes on and on. You can use authority along that border today, what we call 212F authority, which President Trump used several times during his presidency to turn around individuals along that border pretty quickly, such as they did with Title 42. So when you're in an era in a time of unprecedented illegal migration crossings, you have to take some dramatic steps. This administration doesn't have the leadership, the will, the insight, or the vision to take those steps. And so that's why you see, unfortunately, these numbers and the situation along the border not getting better. It's getting worse almost month by month.
Well, thank you so much for joining me this week.
Yep.
It was a great conversation.
All right, thank you.